Back in 2017, I met Andy. Andy had a rare condition called multi-systems atrophy. I met Andy and got to know him and his wife Theresa and his 2 boys very well. He was cared for in his own home during his illness. This is his story. So, hi Theresa, it's really nice to see you again.
It's really good to see you again as well.
So I kind of want to share with you the impressions that Andy made on me. When I came into your home, it was such a normal home. Around the kitchen I saw pictures of Andy and you. I saw him as a young, fit, strong man who obviously had incredible inner resources. But I saw a kindness within him, that he had his family's welfare absolutely as first in his heart.
It was the centre of everything that he did. He had a complete love of life, Andy. Being outdoors and living was really important to Andy.
He had multi-systems atrophy, which was a neurological degenerative disease.
There were issues with balance and coordination, and how quickly he could process decisions. Speech, language were a real problem. Because MSA is so rare, there was no real pattern that we could follow. There was no average deterioration of this disease. It was yourself, I think, when you first started to come, that our relationship with Rennie Grove really, really grew. I always felt really supported and knew that there was going to be somebody that could answer questions that nobody else could. And it wasn't necessarily about the disease, it was how we were going to manage at home with that disease and remain a family with our children for as long as we possibly could. The fact that we could keep Andy at home meant that he had his children with him. He had all of the equipment here that we needed. We had you guys on tap pretty much, certainly in that last week, with advice and support and help, and we were comfortable. Especially with COVID. COVID just changed everything, didn't it? Because everything stopped so quickly. The biggest thing that struck us very, very early on in COVID, when everybody else stopped knocking on the door, was that Rennie Grove didn't. And you looked different, you were masked and you were gowned and everything changed, but you were still very much a big factor of what was happening at home. And that was hugely important to us. By doing that, you have had a significant impact to Andy's last few months. So if I've never said thank you for that, thank you, because that meant a huge amount to us. We weren't alone. Andy was always ill at 1 or 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, usually on a Friday, Saturday or Sunday, when help was really limited. And then coming up to Christmas last year and Andy being so poorly, we called the night team, and I was really surprised that somebody on the end of the phone said, "Shall I come out and see you then?" So 2 ladies came and sat with Andy for a number of hours. What really struck me was that the night team knew us even before we met them. The night team knew Andy's name, they knew his condition, they knew everything was completely seamless. And that was magical for us, because it meant that we could just get some help straight away without having to detail time and time again what we needed. If Andy had stayed in an overnight hospice, his children wouldn't have been able to say goodbye in the same way. I wouldn't have been able to say all of the things that I needed to say to him, all of the conversations that we were able to have when he could still converse, we had in the privacy of our own home at a time that were right for us, instead of a tiny little appointment slot, visited slot. He had everything that he needed here. His children were here, his friends were here. We were in complete control of those final couple of weeks. It was a bit of a waiting game, But it was a waiting game that was completely supported in a way that I never thought was possible, in a way that has allowed me to care for Andy without having any regrets. And for that, I'm hugely grateful. Actually, Rachel, while we're talking about these last couple of days, do you remember the day that you sat here and asked whether it was time to take Andy back out into the Chilterns? So he had gone from this lover of the outdoors to being sat in a chair, completely shielded. And I can remember you kneeling down with your mask on and with your gown on, saying, is it time you went out now?
Yeah, they just lifted, didn't they, some of those restrictions. And then I just, had this glimpse of him out in the open air and, just thinking, this is where he should be. And I just felt that in these last days, potentially, that you needed memories, didn't you? You needed to be able to look back and say, we did that and that was significant.
And I
time.
can. And we had him out twice. And we had him out at real high points on Chilterns, so he could look at that land that he loved. But something else that you said that day was, now some of the restrictions are lifted, is it an opportunity for you to see the people that you want to see? Mm. And for me, that was a huge message, that we were in that place, whatever that place was. And that changed us from being really clinical to, let's just live this last bit of life. And because of you, and solely because of you, we got Andy out twice, so thank you. Andy saw his family and spent quite a lot of time with them, so thank you. And he saw all of his friends, and he gave me a list that day. I don't know whether you were still here or whether you had gone. He gave me a list that day of everybody that he wanted to see, and without exception, he got to see them.
That's brilliant.
So we knew that was going to be a difficult week, didn't we?
Mm.